All right. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another Summit Chaser Week in Review with the Summit crew. We are very excited for this one. Obviously, this is not a Sunday, our usual day. This is a Wednesday, I believe, because we were in the Great White. Actually, it was like the Great Gray North when we were there. Adrina had never, well, you had never been to that part of Canada, but you've been to like BC or Quebec. So she was expecting mountains and forest and stuff. We were in the middle of the prairies, which is most of Canada. And it was Winnipeg, Manitoba. Desolate is probably the word. But we were there for an offsite with one of our clients, and it went absolutely amazing. Great reviews, great feedback, and they're going to go and they're going to take what we went over and what we created for them and what they created for themselves and do a lot of great things. We're very excited about that. But we're here now on a Wednesday. How we doing, ladies?
Doing great.
Good.
I had a lot of fun watching you guys on social. It was good to see the client sharing it, you guys sharing it. I reposted a couple to my stories. Like it was really fun to see the setup and testing out some of our new logo work, evolution. So it feels like everything's really coming together.
New brand design coming soon. I'm excited for that. We're excited for that. They did a great job. Shout out Grace and Gold.
Yeah, Grace and Gold. Like really, really awesome.
Like quick response, quick turnover for improvements, and just came up with some really good, like right off the bat, came up with some really good stuff. Like it's really going to upgrade things for us. So very excited about that. So we're going to shout out Grace and Gold right now. I'll put their link in the description of this one if you want to go check them out. For all of you brand design needs design. I just combined brand and design somehow. Brand design needs. That's just being efficient, everybody.
It's been a long day of speaking.
It's been a long day. It's been a long 4 or 5 days. But no excuses. We're here. So let's go through some of our grow or die moments. So let's start with Chrissy. What was your grow or die moment, or maybe more than one from the week?
Yeah. So I was in Nashville this week for work. Last week, this week, I can't remember what week it is, but last week I was in Nashville at an offsite for work, and we had an exercise which I loved. It was anchored in spontaneity. And Zach, your podcast from this week with Brad, you clipped a little segment about needing to make decisions and not overthinking with data. And there was an analogy you made about like missing the window to make the decision, and then the moment is passed and like the play of the game is over, and now you never have the chance to like actually execute. So we had this exercise where it was pretty spontaneous, and they said, okay, I need you to answer these 3 questions. You have 3 minutes, and they put a timer on the screen, and it was like, what's one decision you would make about your own team in order to like drive 10x results in the next 12 months? What's one thing you would make about our team, as a combined leadership organization? And actually it was like those 2 things were the main questions, and they had the timer on the screen, and no one was expecting this exercise. And then we had to enter it into this spreadsheet, and then we like round robin, like got called on saying what it was. But it was such a good exercise. I think the spontaneity of it, I think when you go through these rituals that you're going to do every day, you have time to kind of like overthink the process. And sometimes I feel like when I'm in these cycles of keeping up with my 5-minute journal, I start to anticipate I'm going to need the same question. And like, I'm going to have to answer the same question tomorrow. And I start overthinking what I'm going to put down. But the surprise aspect of like, you have 3 minutes, it forced all the ideas that people have obviously been thinking about for so long, but haven't really had the nerve to admit to themselves. And it was like such an awesome exercise. That was my grow or die moment of just like working in moments of spontaneity when you can see teams are starting to get into like a rut a little bit, and just like the sensibility, and the clarity that comes out in those moments. So I enjoyed that exercise.
That's a great exercise. First of all,
I was like, how can we use that?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely could, but it's also, I mean, the ability to make decisions is, it's so, I mean, as a leader, as anybody really, any kind of performer, right, is so important. And you have to practice it. Like you have to put yourself and put your team in situations like that to practice them, right? Because we allow, if we don't do that very often, we allow like our own cognitive biases and this kind of stuff to kind of get in the way of our ability to make decisions. And we overthink things, and we make problems out of things that shouldn't be problems. It's so that's a great exercise. I love that.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah. Did you make a note? I guess this is a record. I can go back and watch it. I don't need to take notes of anything. Adrina, what was a grow or die moment for you?
I would say that there's always room for improvement is going to be my grow or die. And I think that really comes from being at our workshop. We always walk away with notes on how to improve things. And I just think that it's so important. You almost can get in this, I'm going to have to edit this. My brain is not braining. You can sometimes get in this headspace where you think, okay, this is going to be the one. Like, I won't need to change it. I can just work with this. We got such great feedback from the workshop, and it had a really great response, and everyone got a lot out of it. But we still walked away with a page full of notes of things that we could do differently. And I think that it's really important to always strive for improving and iterating on anything that you put out, and not accepting this as good as it's going to get, basically.
Yeah, it's sometimes it can be kind of disheartening, because like we kind of talked about that. Like we thought it went so well, and but yet we had all these pages of notes of things we could do better. So we kind of looked at that and we're like, dang it, we're like not even close to being there yet. But you never arrive. That's not the point. The point's not to arrive. It's to continue to get better and impact businesses and lives and create that outcome. So it's not about arriving. It's just about, continuing to do better. You're going to say something, Chrissy?
Yeah, I was going to say, I've been running a team meeting, a cross-functional team meeting, and every week I am kind of going back and reiterating, like, okay, what do I need to add to my agenda? What do I need to do to like send out as a pre-read? How do I tee up the next agenda sooner, and just getting myself organized. And one of my team members has actually been like, Chrissy, I can see the improvement every single week on this meeting. You can see the engagement is getting better every single week. So, or every single meeting, it's bi-weekly, but I think for, it is the journey. And also as the team continues to engage differently, you're going to want to continue to adapt the meeting for how the participants, are starting to really develop and engage with the material. So, it's one thing on how you guys are engaging with the material and wanting to continue to make improvements. It's another to think about, okay, well, how do we have to adapt real time, right? Based on how people are engaging. And I think that's what's so powerful about if you're a good facilitator, really being able to know how to pivot with the content and to drive the best engagement and outcome.
Yeah. Improving how we adapt and how we improve it is big too. You can kind of, you got to be careful too with these kind of things. This is a trap that I've fallen into as well. I got to keep reminding myself is like, don't just make changes and don't just improve it just for the sake of making changes and just for the sake of doing something different. Because then it turns into something else, right? Like actually taking the feedback and actually taking like the data and the experimental loops that you create and like adjusting it appropriately. Don't just, I think this could be better. We haven't changed anything in a few workshops. Let's just change this, right? Is actually, if you don't have the feedback on what to change, if everything looks like it's going good and you don't have any, data points, then don't change it until you get it, right? Don't just keep changing it for the sake of changing it. I've fallen into that trap before, and then I look up and like something's completely different than what I started or what I intended it to do. I'm like, okay, I'm going back to version 3. I love it though. Love it. For me, my grow or die moment was actually, it's more of a, how much should I share? It was more of like a directional thing. I think for some of what we're doing with Summit Chasers, we have the opportunity to work with, work with some non-profits. And you just kind of, when you start to think of like the impact of what we're doing could possibly be, like obviously we can help businesses and business owners, like small businesses and medium-sized enterprises, and we can help them achieve a lot more than what they're currently capable of. But then you go to think of some of the stuff, especially that we did in this workshop, of how a lot of that could work to, this is going to sound maybe a little bit over exaggerated or almost biblical even, but it's like this whole good versus evil thing. And I brought this up to Adrina a few times since then, especially around, like, we talk a lot about like effective communication and leadership. And I was reading a book, and they had it was a concept of, it was quoted, they quoted Jordan Peterson in it. Think of him what you will, he's a very smart individual. But his whole thing is, I'd rather be, a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war kind of thing. So, but the idea is that evil will always have the weapons that they use. And the answer to that isn't to take them out of the hands of good. It's that good needs to be even better at using those things. And we're not talking about literally weapons. We're talking about probably the most effective weapon that we use today, which is our communication.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so much easier to communicate negative, evil things, right? Like, and I kind of use this example today on a podcast. This is just a simple example of, if you're stressed, you're a leader and you're stressed, you've had a bad day, you had funding that fell through, a deal that fell through, your boss screamed at you, or your partner yelled at you, or whatever it is, you're stressed out. And then you have an employee, somebody who's on your team, comes into your office and is like, hey, I'm struggling with this, can I get some help? And you just say, I don't have time right now, go figure it out on your own. And you do it sternly like that. Like, that is so easy to communicate that. Like, physically, emotionally, it's just easy in that moment to communicate that to that individual. But the negative effects that can have on that individual and the outcome that you're trying to create and the rest of your team is huge. So to combat that, to then turn that into a positive scenario, like, you have to be able to, and we talked about this, I think, last week, which is identify what state you're in, which is, okay, I'm stressed right now. Can I handle this right now? Okay, I need to fight my natural current, cognitive state, cognitive biases that I have, and my reactions that I have right now. Take a breath, calm myself down, do some of that 16-second box breathing, just like, whew, okay, we're good. All right, what have you tried so far? Okay, how come you think that didn't work? Okay, what do you think we could do now? Do you mind if I give you some feedback? Okay, so here's what I've done before. All right, so how are you going to know if this is successful? Repeat back to me what you're going to do. That conversation's a lot harder than yelling at them. It's a lot harder to have. It takes more skill. You have to be a better communicator to do that. So it's just a lot easier to communicate negativity and evil than it is good. So you have to be just that much better at communication, at knowing yourself, at developing yourself, if you want to do good things. So I don't know if it was an epiphany or whatever, but like, what we're teaching is, and we're coaching, and what we're helping people with is to be good, to fight negativity, to do good things, and negate as much evil or negativity as you can. So when we're talking to these nonprofits, I mean, what better place, or what more impactful place, I guess, to utilize those skills and to develop those skills in others than in that space, right? Because that's what they're doing. They're combating negativity. They're combating evil. They're combating, societal negativity. So they need to be that much more skilled in this. They need to be more powerful than the negativity. And it takes, I don't know, I'm kind of rambling now, but it was kind of this big epiphany of like, man, we could, like, just how the impact that we could have, and the things that, the skills that we could develop, and some of these people trying to do such good things, I don't know, it got me fired up.
Yeah, it's like the David and Goliath story, right? And I think, like, you and I talked about this in our podcast together. Like, if we're gonna work with organizations that we're gonna help scale and grow and bring people into their orbits, like, we want to make sure that we're using our skills to go create platforms for the right organizations, right? Like, we don't want to go promote companies running evil, like empires around the world. And I think, in tech and in corporate America, and, that's really important. I think people are starting to really work with organizations that align with their personal values. This is so big in, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, etc. I think we're starting to also, just thinking about what we're trying to do with business owners and founders in the Summit Chasers Network is like, how do we bring these success metrics and frameworks to them so they can go build scale and not, be overtaken, because they're really trying to do good. They're trying to build organizations and community, resources for their local environments and helping people get gainful employment within their own neighborhoods and, perpetuating these economies for future generations and things of that nature. So, it's not sexy to do the good work, but it's really important. And I think it really helps balance the powers, you know what I mean? Like, in the universe. And so whether it's nonprofits or, the business owners and founders that we're working with that are going to start creating the nonprofit, philanthropy streams because they see a way, to help kind of give those tools. And I just think that, it's not, I don't think it's a shift in direction, Zach. I think we're just really, what's been so awesome about the last few weeks and months is like, we're really starting to see all of these signals in the universe, like telling us that we're on the right path and this is the right work to be focused on,
Yeah. You're right. I don't think it's not a shift in direction. I guess it's just more, it's more like an epiphany on the impact. Yeah. That we could, Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and really coming into alignment with why we started Summit Chasers to begin with. Like, I feel like we wanted to be able to have an impact on small businesses and then to take it a little bit of a step further and have an impact on businesses who are actively trying to make a huge impact in their communities and fighting these things that are going on all around us. It would be just an alignment of those two goals and allowing us to expand the reach, essentially.
I love it. All right. That felt good to get out. It felt good to talk about.
We're here for you, Zach.
Thank you. Yeah, beautiful. This is the great thing about all women team. They pretty much it's always a safe place. All right, beautiful. So let's, Adrina, you had every week. First of all, let me preface what we're doing first. Every week we highlight a small business or an organization that we feel is doing great things that deserve to be highlighted. Kind of exemplifies the Summit Chaser values. And Adrina, I think, has a perfect example for that today that we're going to highlight.
I do, and it goes along the lines of what Zach was speaking about in nonprofit. So I want to highlight Positive Impact International. I had the honor of speaking with Tammy Wilder, who is the founder of Positive Impact International. Her episode on my podcast actually just went live on Monday, and I will say I left that podcast recording so fired up. I immediately ran out to Zach and started talking about everything that she has going on. I'm going to give you the gist of it. She serves children and youth in Gwinnett County, but she focuses in two different aspects. So they have different artistic programs as well as like financial education, transitioning into the workplace, all of that. But then she also holds the licensing for the Safe Place Agency for Gwinnett County. So she actually houses youth and adolescents who are, maybe they've been kicked out of their house, they're in an unsafe situation, they've run away, whatever it might be. She's got homes within Gwinnett County where these children can go and get into a safe place. And then she also provides different therapy, whether that be just for them or for the parents as well. So it's really full service as far as serving these underserved children within Gwinnett County in Georgia. And I just think what she's doing is absolutely incredible. I don't want to give too much away. Please go listen to the episode. But I will say she started Safe Place by actually bringing children into her own home. And her friends and family all pitched in and started bringing these kids into their homes as well. So really, it just shows that if you're passionate about something and you believe in something and you want to make a difference, you can start absolutely anywhere and then be able to just spread and increase your impact. And I just love what she's doing, love what she stands for. So we'll link her information below, but it is Positive Impact International.
I love it. And yes, go watch that episode. It's a really, it's a great episode. First of all, you did a great job interviewing Tammy, but it's inspiring. It's very inspiring. We're very excited to go to Georgia. We're actually going to Georgia. Did you say that already?
We are. I did not.
We are. You did not. We are going. I froze a little bit, so it's fine. We are actually going to Georgia to speak with other nonprofits that are in her peer group and the Chamber of Commerce over there to see if we can help kind of get them funding so that they can bring in companies like us to support them, give them the foundations to look at it more like I don't want to say more like a business, but in business terms that will allow them to create more of a foundation that they can use as almost like a launch pad to make more of an impact for what they're doing. So we're very excited to be able to do that. And we haven't announced, but we got the trailer, and it's go time. It's go time. So we will be on the road in a few weeks, really. We won't be like gone, but we'll be practicing.
Are you going to take the trailer to Georgia? Is that how you're getting there?
Yeah. That's how we're getting there. All 4 dogs and us in the trailer.
Yeah, it'll be great.
And such limited closet space.
It's not going to be that bad. She thinks it's going to be bad, but we're going to start releasing that stuff pretty soon because there's just so much time in between like events right now. Like we're sold everything. Well, we haven't sold everything, but we sold most things. And it took us a few weeks to get the trailer. Now we got it. And then it's going to be a few weeks before we go out and use it again. So it's kind of one of those things. But that'll start coming up pretty consistently. What do you think? Probably middle of April, I'd assume?
I'd say so, yeah.
Probably, yeah. So something to look out for. I love it. All right. So we're going to quickly go over, as quick as we can anyways, while also giving you good, valuable information and takeaways. So we've been talking about the Summit Laws of Leadership the last few weeks, and we want to continue on that. So we're going to do Law 6 and 7 this week. Law 6, this is the Summit Laws of Leadership number 6, and that is always set your successors up for success, or as we like to call it, build a clock. Make a clock. What do we mean by that, Adrina?
What we mean by that is documentation. So make sure that you are setting up the people around you, the people on your team for success so that they understand how things function, how things should run. And what we mean by make a clock is everything should be completely repeatable. I'm actually going to kick it back to Zach because he told a really great story about clock making. So Zachary, take it away.
Yeah, I don't actually know how to make a clock, but I'll tell you a story about somebody who could.
Did you make up this story, by the way, or is this a real story?
I made it up. Ish.
It's really good though. It gets the point across.
Yeah. So yeah, with the always set your successors up for successes, it's like make sure they have the tools to actually succeed. Make sure they have the expectations. Make sure that those expectations align with the outcomes that they're trying to create. And make sure that the communication is always there so that if they don't succeed, it's because it's just because the strategy was bad or they just weren't meant to succeed. Or they're just not the right person for the role. Right, but everything else, you as a leader should have everything in place for them to succeed. Things for them to go back to read, to learn. You should always be checking up on them, or make sure that somebody is checking up on them, coaching them through everything, and again, just really highlighting the light at the end of the tunnel or their North Star, so they know where they're going. But what we like to call, it's in our Summit Success Method, and it's the second M, which is called make a clock. Mm-hmm. And there's a cool story that I tell when I'm doing workshops, when I'm trying to get this point across. And for those of you listening, I want you to put yourselves in the shoes of somebody who it was 5,000 years ago ish, maybe 6. I don't know what was around back then, but it was 5,000 years ago. And you're part of a village, and your dad, rest in peace. He just before he passed away, he taught you how to tell the time by looking at the sun, by using the sun. And I think a lot of people are outdoorsy. He tell you to like put the hand, and then you can kind of tell like a hand width is about an hour left before the sun goes down. But it tells you how to read how to tell the time by looking at the sun. And so you're up there, you're looking at the sun, and somebody from the village comes up and is like, "What are you doing, man? You're just staring at the sun. It's bad for your eyes." Like, "Oh, I'm telling the time." And the individual's like, "Oh, that's pretty cool. What time is it?" And you're like, "Oh, it's 4:32 and 18, 19, 20 seconds, something like that." And they're like, "Dang, that's very handy, very cool." So everybody, the guy runs back to the village and tells everybody, "This guy can tell time by just looking at the sun." So everybody kind of gets in the rhythm, or they just get used to you being able to tell the time for them. It's like, "Hey, Adrina, what time is it? I want to know when I should give my kids a bath." Or, "Hey, Adrina, what time is it? I need to go hunting and make sure I'm back in time," or whatever it is back then. I don't know what they did to pass the time. And then you just got so sick of having to tell the time for everybody you had to do it for hundreds of people, and you're staring at the sun all day, and you're going blind, and it's just not working. So you're like, you know what? Everybody should just be able to tell the time without me. So I'm going to make a clock for them. So you figure out how to make a clock, whether it's a sundial or whatever it is back then. And you get all the parts, you do the research, and you put everything in place, you build a clock. So now they can tell the time without you. They don't need you anymore to tell the time. They can go look at your clock and tell the time. The village over, they hear that you can build them a clock. They're like, hey, we want a clock. If you guys can tell time, we want to tell time too. How much to build a clock? And you're like, okay, I'll build you a clock. So you go over to the next village and you build them a clock. Well, the next village catches on and hear that you can build a clock. Like, hey, can you mind come and build me a clock? We'd like to tell time too. Everybody can tell time now except for us. Like, yeah, sure. So you go over, build a clock. Years go by and all these villages are coming to you to build a clock. But you're like, man, like the villages are getting too far away. My donkey's getting old. I'm getting old. My back's hurting. These clocks are big these days. And I can't do it anymore. So what do you do? You're like, you know what? I'm just going to teach them how to build a clock themselves. So you document everything. How do you build a clock? What dimensions do you need? What type of materials do you need? All this kind of stuff. What do you need to build a clock? And you teach. You put on a workshop, and you invite everybody from the region, and you teach everybody how to build a clock. And because of that, 5,000 years later, on my phone's my camera. Now we tell time on these things that talk to space. And the point is if you, it's kind of twofold. If you set your successors up for success, it's that they can achieve the current outcome, but also now you're putting these foundations in other people's hands that can innovate, that can create something better over time. And if you keep all that to yourself, it limits innovation and it limits the ability for your team to succeed without always having to come to you, without multiplying yourself. So that's kind of the premise of the story, of the Build a Clock story.
I love it. I had no idea where you're going with this story. I love it.
That's the point. People are like, when's he going to get to the point?
Yeah. Chrissy, I just kept watching your face and I was like, she's trying. She's like trying to figure it out. I love that.
At what point did you figure it out?
Well, okay. I was like, there were some facts in there that I was like, that's interesting. I wonder if it really is a whole hand's width to the bottom before it's an hour left before the sun goes down.
Well, that's true. I mean, ish. It depends how big your hands are. Yeah. That's like how when my dad was teaching me how to hunt, we would like do that. And usually if you put your hand up to the sun about 3 feet from your face, it's the width of your 4 fingers is about an hour. And then you do that until like the horizon. And then that's how much. It's about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour per hand width. So.
Oh, yeah. I mean, amazing. So good. Great story. I loved it.
But that's the point of law number 6, is set your successors up for success, not just for current success right now, but it allows future innovation. Because a lot of times us as the owners, as the leaders, the ones that are the current subject matter experts, we're in a box because we know how things have been done. And then we have this availability bias of this is the way things have been done. This is what's caused success now. So why would I look any further? Where you have other people that have kind of more of a clean slate, that have seen things. They have a different map than you. They see things from other perspectives, and they can be that a little bit more creative outside the box and can innovate and build things better over time. Right.
I have a couple like add-ons to this.
Do it.
Okay. All right. So number 1, I also loved Adrina's face lighting up when she was like, documentation. I was so happy. But I think about bringing this to modern day. There are a lot of people who become these single points of failure where they become the only person that knows how to build the clock, or they are like, you know what, your job is to build the clock. And then before you know it, they don't know how to build a clock for cloudy days or different dimensions or, different, the seasons change and they're like, oh, I didn't know to take into account for daylight savings time. And so that's, I think, the innovation piece of like sometimes why you want to make sure you have the right thought leadership in place, because you also don't want to set your successors up for current day business, right? Like you have to have the right mechanisms in place to go back and like revisit your instruction guide, because clocks also get out of tune. And I think a lot of people and the companies will document and they're like, it's documented, but they don't want to go back and do that not cool work of updating documentation. And
Yeah.
I think this clock concept, I didn't even know I was using it, but I think like really this year for me, I'm in year 2 with my team at my job. And the first year was like, what are we building here? Right? Like, I'm like, what clock do we need? What time are we telling? What time zone are we in? And then this year it's like, all right, let's start figuring out how to build, like, how am I building this clock, and how do I make sure I'm going back to those documents to make sure they're updated, and I can hand this off to someone else, or someone could come join my team and learn how to build the clock with us, right? And so yeah, I think I like the concept of single point of failure came up, business continuity, innovation around different market dynamics. So really amazing story, Zach. Really brought up a lot for me too.
Good. I'm glad.
I love that.
Yeah.
I also want to revisit something that Zach said about development, because it is more than just the documentation side of thing and sharing knowledge and all of that. But if in order to set your successors up for success, you have to actually invest the time in them and make sure that you're having consistent one-on-ones with them, and not just one-on-ones where you do a status update, but truly dive into what their career goals are, what their vision is, what path they're on for growth and success within your company, and then actually helping them develop those skills. Because it's great if there's this grand vision, but if you don't actually put the time in and work with them on how to develop the skills to then prepare them for that role, then it's just words on paper and they're not actually going to be moving towards something. So that development piece, that coaching or mentoring role, and understanding the difference between training somebody versus coaching somebody, they're two completely different things. In order to set your successors up for success, you really need to dive into that coaching and mentoring role so that they're able to learn these things and kind of stand on their own 2 feet, rather than just press the right buttons along the way because that's how they've been told to do it. So you want to constantly be thinking about developing more leaders and putting that time into them and investing in them and their growth.
Yeah, well, that's the main reason. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Zach. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and that's why there's a reason the story doesn't stop at he just builds a clock for them, right? He has to then, okay, what dimensions? I have to make sure I document what dimensions the hands are and the cogs are, and like the actual how do things work, like how do the inner workings actually work, and why is time set up the way that it is, and then you have to be able to teach that and replicate it. You can't just like that story is I just added to a story that was told in a book I read years ago, and it stopped at they just built a clock. And I was like, that's not how it. If you truly want to set them up for success, you don't just build them a clock, because then what if the clock breaks? Like it's all on you again, right? To your point, Chrissy. So, anyways, go ahead.
Okay, so to bring this back around to the laws of leadership from earlier, a couple weeks ago, I think there's a couple things. One, I think sometimes leaders think that they're the only person who can build the clock because there's too much risk in the fact that this clock has to work right, and I can't trust a successor to learn how to do this the way that I need to do it. So I think like that's another thing too, is kind of just understanding how to create enough of a safety net for your successors to learn how to do this business critical work while you're there to help fix the clock if you need to. Another thing to think about is everyone has a different map. So there is a piece of leadership succession where you say, okay, 10 years from now, you're still going to need a clock. But the map that those individuals come on is going to inform their mental model of what a clock is. And so sometimes it's important for you to give them the end result and not like overly dictate like how that clock is built, but like understand that, you know, what needs to actually stay in place, and what freedom are you going to give to the successors that you're developing, to Adrina's point, like coaching them and mentoring them to help them understand like, all right, I have a lot of the capabilities that I'm going to be able to like use to build a clock in the future, but the documentation of how we do it, or the manuscript on how this gets done, might look totally different if I hand this business off to someone else, right? Like they might have a totally different approach on how to do that because they had a totally different map about how they got to that point in their life. And
Yeah.
so I think that's where we also really need to make sure that the succession slate within your business has good diversity of thought, across it. There's good different skills around problem solving. Like, you as a business leader might be a really linear thinker, which is why you've gotten to this threshold in your business. Someone else might think about problems a different way. And they might be able to take the business, I think, in like, well, to our conversation before, right? Like, Zach was like, are we changing direction? And we're like, no, we're exactly where we were meant to be headed. We're just thinking about it in adjacent ways, right? There's a million ways for us to get to the goal that we have, right? So I think that's just a couple ways to just kind of build your own self-awareness when you are creating your succession bench of, like, what's a nice to have versus a must have, and like what can really, like, stretch your own framework of what's possible for the business, so you can step away, right, and go do some of these passion projects and things of that nature.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is you had a kind of you had a good point of allowing them to fail. Like, what kind of safety nets do you have to put in place? What kind of failure mechanisms do you have to put in place? And a lot of we see this a lot with like different departments and mostly like medium-sized businesses when they start to have department separation. Is what type of leadership does each department need, or each kind of focus point need? Because if you're in more of a marketing or product development, or anything creative, right? That type of leadership is a lot different. You have to give room to fail. Like, that's just how you learn. Is you do experiments, and then the ones that don't work, you move on from them, and then you point in the directions of the ones that worked out a little bit better, and then you do a whole bunch of experiments. So you have to give so much more freedom to fail, because if you don't give them your employees or the people on your team, if you don't give them that freedom and safe place to fail, you're just not going to be as creative. It's just the way it is.
Right.
If you put them in a box, they can't be as creative. They're not going to catch things. You're going to lose your edge. But then you move over to, like, if you're especially in like a sales, like a very linear, structured like sales cycle, or if you're on like an assembly line, right? Like actual like production, then that's like you go to like Kaizen, where like there's no missteps, right? You go through your day. If you have an idea, right, you follow the book until you guys can go and like have a conversation and do a little bit of brainstorming from there. But your actual work, you can't be there's not as much room to fail, because you could fail. It could be somebody gets hurt, right? Like physical things could happen. Like, just think back to some of my clients, like they were building windows on an assembly line, right? If they tried to experiment and were creative in the moment, the outcome was like somebody could get really hurt, or you lose thousands of dollars because your product wasn't it had a faulty product, right? So you kind of have to identify and be careful with what type of freedom, what type of leadership you need to put in the more creative roles, and then the ones that need to be more like the more Six Sigma Kaizen type of processes, right? So yeah, I don't know how to end that.
Next law.
But actually, I think that we covered that one pretty good. I think that is probably going to be good for that. What do y'all think? Do you want to go into the next one, or do you want to save that for next week?
I think we save it for next week,
because this one doesn't have a lot to do with the last one. So I'm like, I don't know if that would flow really well. But the next ones, actually, 7 and 8 are going to be very complimentary of each other. So we'll save that for next week. We want to leave y'all wanting more. Anybody have any closing words before we get everybody's hair?
keep chasing your summit.
Keep chasing your next. Yeah, you should be doing that.
I'm so shy when I say it for you.
I know you get all you like. You say it proud, right? Like, we're summit chasers. People are listening to this. We're summit chasers. But we really want to appreciate everybody for showing up today. I know it's not on a Sunday; it's a Wednesday night. Possibly not seeing it till Thursday morning, because it is a little bit later right now. But I just want to say thank you for spending your time with us. We really appreciate you. And as Adrina said, keep chasing your next summit. You get so cute.